Okay, in this third session at today's lecture, we will cover how Korean food culture itself has been the product of natural environment of the Korean peninsula. It is quite natural in a sense that any food culture of any country would be the result of the climate and other national environment of their country. And Korea is not an exception, of course. And to understand the Korean food in general, we need to look at the Korean map. And as you see here on this map, the Korean peninsula is long between north and south. And also, it is narrow between east and west. However, from north to south, there is a big mountain range runs. And it is called Baekdu-daegan in Korean. And this mountain range begins from the Baekdu mountain, which is considered as a sacred mountain for Koreans today. In the past, also Manchu people, they also consider the Whitehead mountain, which is Baekdu mountain, or Chinese call it Jangbei. This mountain has been a sacred mountain, and from there, this mountain range goes to south. So basically, Korean peninsula is divided by east, wide, very narrow east and wide west by this mountain range. And north is very cold and south is warmer. So because this peninsula is stretched from north to south, the northern people's food and food culture would be very different from the southern people's food and culture. And this is probably, if you understand, Italy, Italian culture between northern Italy and southern Italy is pretty different. Okay? And it is the similar in Korea. The northern culture, food culture, language or dialect is quite different from those of southerners. Now that means that there is a climatic diversity in the Korean peninsula. And also, because of this mountain range between east and west, there is also climatic different variances between east and west. So this creates quite interesting diversity within the food culture of Korea. And also, another characteristics of Korean natural environment, climatic environment, is summer in Korean peninsula is very humid and very hot, while winter is very cold, particularly in the north, very cold and dry. So very hot and humid summer and very cold and dry winter. Now that means each season, Koreans would eat different kinds of food. So now, in general, this natural environment would create today's Korean food as well as Korean culinary culture. So let's look at it more specifically. How natural environment has been working on contemporary or historical Korean food culture. Now, each region in the Korean peninsula, they have their own food. If you ask Koreans, they would know how the northern food, like Hamgyongdo province food, is different from, say, Seoul food in central Korean peninsula, and how Jeolla province food in southwest is different from southeastern provinces of Gyeongsang province's food. These food are very much distinguished from each other, and that is a result of these topographical differences as well as climatic differences on the Korean peninsula. Also, like for example, north and south will be very different. The Korean food that you know of today, something like cold noodle. Cold noodle is a product of northern food. because cold noodle is traditionally made of buckwheat, which is more suitable to hilly regions and colder climate. So Northerners also the central Korean, the mountainous areas, there people grow buckwheat, and they tend to have many cuisine that came out of buckwheat. While people who are living in the lowland, especially in the south and central, they very much rely on rice. So that creates quite impressive regional diversity in Korean food culture. In addition, Koreans rely on seafood very much, and that's easily understandable because Korean peninsula is surrounded with the three seas. East, or Japanese call it Sea of Japan, or Koreans call it East Sea or Donghae, and then Southern Sea, the Namhae, and Western Sea, which often called the Yellow Sea. Okay, so Korean peninsula is surrounded with these three seas, which means there are abundant seafood in Korean culinary culture. As a matter of fact, statistically, Koreans are one of the highest consuming, the fish consuming countries in today's world. So if you look at any Korean dishes, you can easily find the grilled fish in baekban or rice, fixed rice meal, or fish stewed like a dongtae-jjigae at the center in this image, and also kim, the seafood, the seaweed, the dried and roasted seaweed. These foods represent Korean culinary culture, and they are all sourced from the three seas that surrounds Korean peninsula. And this kind of environment tend to create fermentation culture because your winter is so cold and dry, and you can't grow any green vegetables, which means you have to invent ways to preserve your vegetables that you harvested in summer and in autumn. Now, kimchi came from that. Okay? So kimchi is a way to preserve these vegetables so that people can have some vegetables in winter. And now, the method was fermentation. And we will talk about fermentation more in detail later, but fermentation is an amazing and smart method, not just confined to Koreans, but also throughout the whole world. We human beings have been using fermentation to preserve our food, and like European pickles and yogurt, and also making alcohol, and also they use fermented food for new flavoring. Okay? So fermentation was for preservation of vegetables, particularly like in Korea, kimchi and seafood, which is an essential in making kimchi, the fermented fish, okay, which Koreans call jeokgal. And also it becomes the most essential, the sauce for Korean food, like a doenjang or soybean paste, 간장, soy sauce, and gochujang is chili paste, and jeokgal, the salty fermented fish. So fermentation was an essential method in Korean culinary culture, and as it is in many cases in other countries' food as well. Okay, so we have covered how Korean food has been influenced or impacted by Korean natural environment. And in our next session, we will talk about then what were the traditional ingredients of food in Korean food and food culture.